Amplification, and we have today on the bench the Thordarson PA amplifier from the late 1940s that I am converting into a guitar amplifier. And I thought that I would be complete with this today for this video, but as it turns out, I modified the circuit a little bit with the original layout that it had, and I failed to realize that the tubes that were needed for the circuit that are wired actually up in here are different than the tubes that it came with. And we'll go over that here in a little bit on the schematic. But I've since then went online and ordered a 6 SL7 tube and a 6 SN7 tube because I was one short of the SN7, and then I had a 6 SJ7 instead of a 6 SL7, and the J7s are pentodes and the SL7s are dual triodes. So the way I had this wired up, I couldn't substitute them. So anyway, basically I used kind of the same tube complement that the original amplifier had, but I turned it into a single channel instead of the original amplifier had a phono input and 2 mic inputs, and so I've just right now got one single channel, but I may end up going with 2. And anyway, let's look at the inside of this thing real quick. Now I want to start out by saying, before we zoom in on this, that I'm not happy with the way this turned out as far as the layout and everything goes. I've never done a total scratch build. This thing was completely gutted. If you remember from some of my previous videos, I completely gutted this out. Took the transformers off on the other side, everything. Completely gutted it out, basically. It was just, there was nothing inside here. And if I had it all to do over again, I would have done things differently. I would have probably built all the tone circuit and the power supply circuit and everything on a turret board or a eyelet board or something, and then placed it in there and wired it to the sockets. But instead I went with these little terminal strips, and you'll see here in a minute when we start looking at the schematic, the tone circuit on this particular amp that I chose to make this off of is very complicated. It's a lot more complicated than most of your Fender, Marshall, Vox, all the, Gibson even. This is a really complicated tone circuit. So it was a challenge getting it all in there. So let's zoom in on it a little bit. Alright, so up here on the top, these 2 terminal strips up here are basically where all the tone circuit stuff lies. In this little area right here. There was, in this particular design, there was 30 capacitors and 36 resistors. So it's a very complicated design. Most of the filter power stages and the B rail is right here. This is the ground rail down here. Like I said, this would have been much easier to put it on some kind of terminal board or eyelet board and just mounted it in there. I had plenty of room to do that, but anyway, I chose to run my filament wires where they're going to be basically on the bottom of the amp chassis base when it gets mounted here. So basically up, over, and then down, and then back up, and then over, and then down. It's the way I chose to run them. Another thing I did is I ran the filament wires first. That's a no-no. To anybody out there building an amplifier, put those in last because you end up getting, this stuff ends up getting in your way. And I actually scorched this one a little bit with the iron. Didn't go all the way through to the bare copper, but it looked kind of ugly, so I put a little piece of tape on there just to give it enough insulation. But yeah, so that looks really ugly, and like I said, if I had this to do all over again, I would do the filament wires last. Okay, so down here we have all of our transformer connections. This is the twisted AC lines for the 5-volt 5Y3, or excuse me, 5U4 rectifier tube. And then this is the high voltage wires here, twisted, going to the rectifier tube. And then my 6.2 or 6.3 volt wires are coming across here to this first one, and just daisy chains around here, and just daisy chains over here to the lamp as well. Over here is the lamp, so it just daisy chains around. Well, like I said, I would do this a lot differently than I had before. Right here I got a shielded, really short. I kind of changed this up because the original way this thing was wired was a little bit different, but I ended up making this closest valve, or this closest tube socket right here as my input socket. So that was the first one coming in. So just a little short piece of shielded wire over here. Let me turn this around where you can see. Okay. So right now I only have one input wired, but I've got places here for 2 inputs. I've only got 1 output wired, but I got places for 2 outputs as well. I'm gonna do this one right here is wired as an 8 ohm, and I'm gonna wire this one as probably a 4 ohm. I may switch them. Right now though, it's just gonna be an 8 ohm. There was these 2 really big holes that were drilled out here for the original outputs, and I just plugged those with some rubber plugs that come with they come in like a grommet kit. Let me show you that real quick. So this grommet assortment pack you can get online. I believe I got it from Amazon. But it comes with various types of grommets, and it's got some plugs as well, various sizes as you can see here. So that's where I got that from. And I also use the grommet for the new power cord as well. All right, I got my fuse holder here. This is a brand new fuse holder. The original fuse holder was kind of it was really corroded, and I just really couldn't get it that clean on the inside. So I just went ahead and decided to go with a newer style, but still got that kind of retro look to it. So that's that. This right here was the original voltage selector switch, and right now it's not wired in, but I've got it just kind of in place here to keep that hole closed up. And if you remember from my original video, the original color of this amplifier was this gray right here. And then I put this blue on it and clear coated it. So let me turn it around so you can see the front. Okay, so this is what it's looking like right now. I've only got 1 input, and I've got a base and a treble control, and then I got the on-off switch up here. So, and then you got the green light down here. Now, right now, this was the original light, it's green. I think I'm gonna go with probably a clear one, or if I can find a blue one, I'll go with blue, because this green doesn't really look good on this blue. But for right now, that's what I got, is the green one. And once I wire in another input, probably at a different impedance, I'll put it right here. And then I'm also looking at, I didn't wire this thing with a feedback loop, so I'm looking at maybe using this spot for a potentiometer for the feedback, kind of a presence control or something like that. Right now I only have 3 of these Thordarson, original Thordarson chicken head knobs. So I'm looking for some others. I do have some, you know, they'd almost work, but they're not quite there. as far as the color and the shape and everything. But if you guys know where I can find these Thordarson chicken heads, they're probably really hard to find. So, but if you guys know where I can find them, let me know. I need a couple of them. All right, so let's look at this. Well, wait before we look at the schematic, let me back this thing up, and I will show you the latest creation that I've done for the speaker for this thing. So there's how the top goes on, okay? And then what I want to do for a speaker is this. I found this on eBay. And the original color of this was kind of a beige color, I guess you would say. And I took the speaker out, took it all apart, took these little rosette bolts out, and painted it blue just like the amplifier. So that's what the speaker's going to be for this thing. I'm going to mount it up here somehow, and then you'll have this, the ability to kind of, angle it up or down or however you want to angle it. But doesn't that look just neater than snuff? Look at that. Oh, it's beautiful. All right, so let's look at the schematic real quick. All right, so this is a schematic for this thing, and basically the inputs are over here, and it runs through the first stage right here, and then the second stage, and then there's a treble control right here between the second and third stage. On the other side of this, which is a dual triode here, this 6SL7, the bass control is tied into that grid. So basically some of your signals coming up into this treble control and into the grid, one grid of this dual triode, and some of it's actually making its way over here to this other one in the bass control. It's two separate tone controls basically. Let me zoom in on that so you can see it. So as you can see, this is a very complicated circuit right here. This is probably the same amount of components that you would have in a full treble, bass, mid-range, Fender or Marshall tone circuit. But this has a whole extra set of values and stuff right here for the bass controls here. So, and it's on two separate sides. So, oh, by the way, this is a national 1215 made by Valco. So it's probably early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. So right around the same time period as this PA was made. So that's basically it. The original Thordarson amplifier had a transformer for the phase inversion, and this goes with a 6SN7. So you can see right here that's doing the phase inversion for the push-pull 6L6s right here. So I took that that transformer out. Also, the original Thordarson amplifier had a choke right here in the power supply that it used for filtration, and this amplifier didn't call for that, so I took that out as well. So I have a Thordarson choke and a Thordarson transformer that I've salvaged out of this thing. I'm also not using 1/2 of this 6SN7 over here because that was solely for the microphone input. So there's another stage there that I can possibly do something with, and also an extra socket in there as well. So it's basically what I have. I went with a little bit different values. I went with kind of a Fender type thing with the 68K grid stopper resistor and a 1 meg grid leak resistor, which this one only had the grid stopper. And then the microphone had a grid leak but no stopper, so I went with kind of a traditional Fender setup right here, coming into the input. I did not do the feedback loop coming off the secondary of the output transformer. I can always put that in later if I think I need to, and if I do, I'll put a potentiometer in here somewhere, right here, probably in place of this 500 K or this 50K resistor right here, for that feedback. But that is not wired in there. One thing I did want to show you though is as I was wiring this up inside the amplifier, I was taking a highlighter, and this is something that you guys can use as well, however you want to do it. Some people make little tick marks or something whenever they install a component or whatever, check it off. I basically highlighted as I went, and the way I did it was I actually started at the output transformer and I worked my way back through like this to the input, and then I did the power supply last. And the reason I did the power supply last, which is a good idea, I didn't intend it this way, but it worked out, is because I had the power transformer out of the unit because I was cleaning it, and I noticed that it made the unit a lot easier to move around and stuff when I was working inside of it, not having that heavy weight on it. So I left it out the entire time, and then I just came back and did this power supply last. So that was just the reason. I mean, it wasn't an intentional, I'm going to do the power supply last. It was just, it benefited me because that power transformer not being in the unit. So I would definitely do that again. I would use the power transformer, you know, keep it off of the unit while I'm working on it so I don't have that heavy weight and stuff on it, and then do the power supply stuff last. So I guess the three things I would take away from this build is definitely run your filament wires last, so they're not getting in your way, especially if you're going to run them like I did, where they're going up and down and over, and they're running like these would be running on the edge of the chassis, but they're going to be on the bottom edge of the chassis. But you know, if you're going to run them, I guess, on the sides of the chassis around the corners, then it won't matter. The way these particular sockets were oriented, and I guess I could have turned the sockets around. You can take the little retention pins off and push them up and turn them and put them back down, but I just kind of wanted to keep them the way they were. But the way they were oriented, they were kind of all interior. All the filament sockets were interior of the cabinet, so it just made sense to me to take them up and over and then down like that. Kind of kept them out of the way, except for that I did that first and they were in the way. So that's one lesson. Do your filament wires last. The next thing is if you run into a circuit like this, it's very, very complex, and you have a lot of connections you have to make and a lot of components in like one or two spots. I would suggest building it outside of the chassis on a turret board or a eyelet board or something, and then mounting it in the chassis and then making your connections from there. It just make things a lot easier. And then the second thing, lesson learned, which actually did, is you know, take off all your heavy components first, or, you know, leave them off while you're working on the inside of the chassis, and then do that last. The output transformer wasn't that heavy, so I actually kept that on, but the power transformer is really, really large. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. I should have those tubes in a couple of days. I'll get them installed. I'll do a sound check on this thing and a test, hook it up to the oscilloscope and everything to see what kind of waveform we got on it. And I already did a preliminary check with what I have. I have the rectifier in there. I already did a check on all my B pluses, my filament. They're all good. Everything's good. I made all those checks. I'm just waiting on those 2 tubes, and we'll be ready to go on this thing. And this thing ought to be on a little rocking guitar, hopefully, or a little rocking guitar amp, hopefully. I appreciate you watching, and maybe by the end of the week I should have those tubes in, and we'll get a sound check on this thing. Please subscribe, like the video below, hit that little bell, it'll give you notifications. And again, thank you for watching. For SRT Amplification, this is Will. Till next video.